Hey, how's it going, guys? Today we're going to be chatting about something that a lot of people have probably seen if you've been watching my stream recently, and that is hitboxes, which I know is something that I often shut down when people ask me about it on stream. They ask, what car is the best hitbox? I don't really like answering that question all the time, so I try not to talk about it too much, because then more people are going to ask about it. But I saw a really interesting Reddit thread recently, and I'll go into detail on that in a minute. But the purpose of this video is mainly to give players who might just get stuck playing the Octane all the time because they see all the pro players playing Octane, and you want to try something different perhaps, or you just want to know a little bit more detail about why certain hitboxes are good and why they work better for most players. But first we're gonna go out of Rocket League and look at the Reddit thread that I found the other day. It was 10 days ago, submitted by Trelgny. I'm sorry, probably saying that name wrong. I say everybody's name's wrong. But this is the word that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be talking about hybrid hitboxes. And if you look at the table that we have here, we can see Octane is here, Dominus is here, Plank is here, Breakout, and Hybrid. And Plank, if anybody's wondering, I think the closest thing to Plank is Mantis, as we can see down here. So that's really what we're looking at. We're comparing 5 very popular hitboxes. Apparently there's no exact match for the hybrid, but the Endo's closest. But don't worry, we'll get into the detail of that in a minute. The main thing to take note of is that recently Psyonix went away from their original hitbox design, and that was every car had a unique hitbox, and they've decided to make standardized hitboxes. So every new car that gets released, I believe, is going to be added to one of these 5 types of hitbox, not be given its own fancy hitbox. And if we scroll down to the top comment, I'll just or one of the top comments, I'll show you right here before we get into any more detail. These are the cars that fall into all of the different categories. So if you want to, then you can pause the video here, find the car that you play, find out what hitbox it actually falls under, and that's the little list of all the cars right there. But as you can see, hybrid, this is what we're going to talk about today. The Skyline, the Endo, the Esper, the Jaeger, the Venom, and both the XL and the XL MK2. They are the cars that we're going to be talking about. I might make a future video about the Octane hitbox cars and why certain players, well, the vast majority of players just play the Octane, or is there a better Octane hitbox car now that they've all been standardized? But that's the cars that we're going to be looking at. Let's go back up here now with that in mind, and let's look at a few things. So the main things for hitboxes is obviously the length, the width, and the height of the hitbox. I believe the offset is just how much it tilts. So the Octane, the wheels at the front are smaller, therefore it's got a bigger tilt than the Dominus, where the wheels are more standardized. But I don't think that matters too much. Although, I've always had this idea that maybe the cars with more tilt are easier to dribble with, because the ball's not going to start bouncing as much. It's going to be inclined to stick to your car as you're pushing it forward. But anyway, that I'll not go into too much detail about that. Elevation, this simply means how far off the ground the hitbox actually starts. So if you notice that the elevation of the Octane and the hybrid is identical, they're much higher off the ground. That means that their axles, where the bottom of the hitbox is, are higher off the ground than the Dominus, Plank, and the Breakout hitboxes. So when it comes to length, clearly the hybrid has the Octane beat by a long way. It's I think the Octane, I just did a calculation, hopefully it's correct, is 92.91% off the hybrid's length. And of course that's going to mean the hybrid is probably going to hit flicks a little bit more easily, perhaps not more accurately, but certainly going to be able to get that last touch with the back of the car as you try to flick it a lot more easily than the Octane will. Width though, the Octane is winning here, although the hybrid doesn't lose out quite as badly. It's 97.61% off the Octane's width. And height is where the Octane is still king. The hybrid is 94.47% off the Octane's height. So since the Octane is bigger in 2 dimensions, that does mean that overall it is slightly larger area, but it's into the decimal points. So it's really a small number different. They're pretty much the exact same area, with the hybrid being significantly longer, the Octane being marginally wider, and a little bit taller as well. So if you are trying to, or if you want to try something different than your Octane, the hybrid cars are definitely the way to go. The increase in length is not the only benefit you get. You also get an improvement in handling, which, although there's no table for that, we do, this thread here says, thanks to Halfway Dead, we have a preset order best to worst for handling, and as you can see, hybrid comes right above Octane, which is the worst car for handling. That means it turns the slowest. So although we don't have a number here in this document, I trust this. So the hybrid turns better. That's another reason to do it, not just because it's longer, but also because it turns faster. Okay, so I'll show you guys some screenshots. So there's a really great thread. There's the original hitbox comparison. So this is when the Dodge, or what the hitboxes, used to look like before they were all standardized, and this is now what they look like after they've all been standardized. You can see the type of hitbox that it falls under is right underneath the name. No, the Batmobile doesn't actually have one. It's unique, but we'll not talk about that any further right now. So I've picked out the 7 hybrid hitboxes, and let's take a look at them all and see what we can see. So this is the Skyline, and as you can see, if you're playing the Skyline, the hitbox actually reaches significantly higher than the car does from any angle. The Skyline is pretty flat, but the hitbox reaches much, much higher than that. And not only that, but the nose of the Skyline, this is going to be a little bit too close to home, it reaches way out of the hitbox. And this is significant, because and I'll tell you why later. But also the back, although that's less important in my opinion. But certainly the front, it reaches way, way out there. And it's also noteworthy that the sides of the hitbox extend a bit further than the Skyline also. So when you add all of that together, this point, which is actually a point of contact for shooting with the Skyline, is further out from the side of the actual Skyline graphic. It is way higher than the top of the roof, and it is also way further in than the front end of the Skyline, although it's closer when you take in this curve and you try and compare it to this point here. You expect that you're going to be hitting the ball with this part of your car, but it's going to make an impact over here. So the thing I'm trying to explain is that this hitbox doesn't look anything like the car. And it's worth mentioning, a lot of pro players have been trying the Skyline recently and saying that they like it, but I honestly think it might just be placebo effect. They want to like it, because I don't see how this hitbox can be intuitive for striking the ball when it is so different than the graphic of the car that you actually see. And placebo effect is a very, very powerful thing, and you can use that to your advantage. You can try to play a car that you like the look of, because you might end up playing better than you would in a car that you think is ugly. That's totally fine. Even though the cars are exactly the same, you're going to feel better in one, therefore that feeling is going to make you actually play better. That's totally okay. I'm not saying that pros are wrong. Maybe they do genuinely play well in these cars, but I think the reason is that they like the car, because it is a very good looking car, very famous car, and not necessarily because it is a good car in terms of the appropriateness of the hitbox. But let's look at some of the other ones. That's a very interesting car to look at. Definitely give it a go, see what you think of it, see if you like how the hitbox matches up with the graphic. The Endo, similar sort of story. It's a bit thinner than the hitbox graphically. It's a bit smaller, and it reaches out a bit further, at least at the very point of the nose it does. But the Endo is so curved at the front that I think that is also a difficulty for at least learning how to shoot with it quickly, trying to get good fast, because you think you're going to be hitting the ball with this part of the car, but actually this part of the hitbox impacts the ball earlier than you might expect, and that might lead to you losing some power in your shots. And if you're like front flip shooting, then you're going to end up hitting it later than you expected, because the nose is all the way out here. So that's also something to keep in mind. The Endo, I think when it was released, it had quite a lot of popularity, again because it's quite a good looking car, and I really do believe that cars that just look better, have more cool decals, have more cars that come in the titanium white painted variation are always going to be people are going to think that they're better than they actually are, just because they're cooler. That's totally fine. But the Endo, not the best match for hitbox either. Also very rounded. I'm not a fan of cars that are very rounded like this, because you're playing a rounded graphic and it's a rectangular hitbox, so that doesn't make sense. But let's move on. Esper, the first one so far that at least at some point is pretty close to reaching the top of the hitbox graphically, and also it does reach all the way out to the side of the hitbox on the back, but not on the front, but it does on the back. So at the back of the Esper, you're pretty much filling out the hitbox perfectly. It reaches every exterior surface of the hitbox, but the front is a little bit less so. So this is probably why most people don't like playing the Esper. You're trying to shoot with the front end, and there's a big disparity here with where the ball is going to come into contact with the car. And also the Esper, not the best looking car in most people's opinion, so it might just be a feel bad car for you. Unless if you love the look of it, then go for it. You're probably going to think you're going to feel great, and you're going to be pretty on point for ball carrying, because look how close this is to the top of the hitbox here. It's going to be very, very easy to know what time the ball is about to land on your car when you're trying to catch it. So that's important. The other thing to note is that although the Esper might not look like the hybrid, or it doesn't look anything like the Skyline and the Endo, right? But they do actually have the same hitbox. See, the hitbox is not changing there. So you just have to believe that it is true. Trust me. That's how Psyonix have decided to do this. Moving on, the Jaeger. So this is one that I actually did enjoy playing. I like the Jaeger. None of these cars, when I tested them, really felt like I could shoot the ball very well, because they were mismatching the front of the hitbox so badly. I just felt like I was missing power shots a lot, or missing a little bit of the power at least, and accuracy. But the Jaeger's the closest so far to what you would expect. Still not exact match. It's got a slightly less curvy front than the Endo, but still slightly curved. Probably about the same as the Skyline, but less protruding, I would say. It is filling the hitbox a little bit better in terms of width than the what do you call it? Oh no, it's actually bang on the same. Yeah, it's almost exactly the same width-wise. I think it's just like this one point here sticks out quite far, which is, it looks like that might even be, that might even be the skirting, so not that important really. But I like this better than the others, just because it was closer to an exact match. If you compare where do you think you're going to be hitting the ball with, where are you actually hitting the ball with? For the Jaeger, it was just that little bit closer than the Endo was just a mess for me. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. So it's not bang on the front surface at any one point, but, well, apart from here, I guess, but it's closer. It doesn't go as far away as the Skyline does, and it's not as inconsistent as the Endo. And I mean, the Esper, well, it speaks for itself. The other thing to know about the Jaeger is it didn't feel to me like the ball was sitting well when I tried to carry the ball on top of my car. It kept bouncing a little bit, and I don't know if that was just because I didn't test it enough to learn properly where the ball's supposed to be, where the ball indicator on the ground is supposed to be relative to the car. But for me, it was more difficult than some of the cars that are going to be coming up next. But yeah, Jaeger, I liked it, and it might even be placebo for me to some degree, because I like the look of it, and I kind of wanted it to be good. I was like, I really hope I do really well in the Jaeger, because I think it looks so cool, and it would be awesome if I could be a Jaeger main, because, you know, it comes in you can get titanium white variation of it, you can get, there's no printed decals yet, but oh man, I wish. I think that makes a difference as well, just in terms of how much you're going to enjoy the car, and that's probably going to make you feel like you're playing better. But next up is the Venom. And this is super interesting, because the Venom it's one of those cars. If I was to say to you which one of these 4 cars I've shown you looks most like the Venom, you'd probably have to go with the Esper, because they've got those large protruding wheels. The wheels don't show up here for the Venom, but they're massive wheels. They're all the way out there. And you'd think that would make it difficult to shoot with this car, but actually, I thought the Venom was so easy to shoot with. And don't be fooled by this huge gap between the front of the hitbox and the actual impact point. This isn't your impact point visually, because the wheels again are hidden. The wheel actually comes out to about here, and I can show you that once we get into game. The wheel is really, really close. The corner of the wheel is almost bang on to this hitbox. It's about this far in, just like it is at the front. So as you can see, this is the flattest front out of all of these cars that we've seen so far. And for me, that was making power shots so simple. I was loving it. I thought this is probably, for me, the best one that we've played so far. And unfortunately, it doesn't have, all the amazing, cool decals a lot of other cars in the game have, because it's not as popular, and that makes sense. But it does shoot very well, because the front end of the car is very, very intuitive. You hit the ball exactly when you would expect to hit the ball. As far as dribbling goes, this rounded top, I said that rounded earlier is bad for shooting, but it's actually good for dribbling because the ball interacts with the top of your car the same way that it would interact with a rounded object. Like if the ball is slightly to the left, it will roll off on the left. If it's slightly to the right, it will roll off on the right. The more further to the right it is, the faster it will roll off. If it's just exactly in the middle, it's going to sit there, but it's not going to sit there forever. Eventually it'll start rolling slowly one direction, it'll roll off. So if you're trying to dribble in Rocket League, having a rounded object or having a rounded car is good. It's only bad, round is bad if you're trying to shoot, because you're probably expecting the car to hit the ball at a different time than it actually does. But this is why I think round at least is good when you're trying to ball carry, and cars that are rounded on top are usually, they lend themselves to be easier to carry the ball with, because the ball does interact with the top of the completely flat hitbox that Rocket League gives it in the way that it would interact with a rounded object, not in the way that it would interact with a flat object. Obviously if you had a flat hitbox and the ball was sitting on top over here, it wouldn't move. If it was sitting over here, it also wouldn't move. It would just sit there. But because of the Rocket League physics, the car is impacting the ball from its center of mass, and therefore it's pushing it off the edge of the flat hitbox. That's why it looks like the ball treats the car, or interacts with the car the way that it would interact with a rounded object. But that's only for dribbling. Don't forget that. Ball carrying and dribbling, different from shooting. If I'm trying to catch the ball here, maybe that's going to be a bit thrown off. But remember, I found this easier to dribble with than this, even though this is flatter, and I think that's why. Worth remembering. X-Devil. I remember, I'm not going to lie, I only played 3 games this recently and I didn't have a good time. It felt really sluggish, and it might just be because it looks less nimble than some of the other cars. Like the Endo felt really quick, but I mean, look at it, and the Venom felt quick, you know, it felt a lot more nimble than the X-Devil, which is a big bulk. But in terms of the cars we've seen so far, almost bang on the front, falls back a little bit, so the shooting with the corners might be a little bit harder, but certainly front flip shooting, you're going to get exactly what you came for. And you got that nice rounded top for dribbling. Like flicks felt great here, but I don't know if it was just placebo again. This felt really sluggish when I played it, and it might just be me. Maybe you play it and you think you feel like Speed Demon, but that's what I thought at least. So we haven't, of course, if you look back at all the cars, none of the cars except the Esper really reached the very top of the hitbox very well. But obviously, since you're playing Rocket League with a camera that looks kind of down past the car, that doesn't really matter that much as this does. This is by far the most important. Like how good is the match on the front end? This is really, really important. I think the most important part of a hitbox. So I think that's one of the huge benefits of the XL if you want to give it a go. XL MK2, it doesn't match as exactly in the middle, but it matches better at the corners. It brings the wheel forward a little bit, and it's more flat altogether, which is always a good thing. I think the more flat and straight the hitbox is at the very, very front of the car is really, really important. So I'd say XL MK2, although it doesn't match in the middle quite as well, is probably going to play better for you than the X-Devil, because it's more consistent across the front, just like it was in the Venom and the Esper. Not like the Jaeger, not like the Endo, not like the Skyline. So X-Devil MK2, it's probably going to play a little bit better. Again, it felt kind of sluggish. I think it's just because it's a big bulk of a car. I'd say graphically it looks a bit better, so it felt better than the X-Devil. I was like, I kind of hope, I want this one to be better. I hope I hope I play well in this, because then I can have a confirmation bias that it is in fact better in the X-Devil. And although guys might just call that, oh, that's just bias. You're letting that affect your judgment. I'm telling you guys that because if I didn't, then that would be me letting it affect my judgment, like keeping that part a secret. I am aware that there is placebo effect in this, in every test. It's kind of like a test drive or anything, if you want to call it that. And talking about it, being aware of it, allows you to then use it to your advantage, even if it does exist. But yeah, X-Devil MK2, I think slightly better than the X-Devil, but it felt sluggish. It just feels like you're driving a brick, and who wants to drive a brick? So this is why Venom was my favorite. I did also like the Jaeger for shooting, because it was pretty close. It felt like I was hitting all my power shots, because it was less inconsistent across the front than things like the Skyline. I mean, look at that difference. The Skyline is way out there. Like front flip shooting, how on earth are you supposed to do that properly? Really? Well, I guess you can if you practice it enough. But that's another element. How willing are you? How much do you like this car to suffer learning how the hitbox works? Then that if you really like the car enough, then sure, go for it. And I mean, that's why I think a lot of people like the Skyline. They just played it enough. They've gotten used to it. But yeah, I'd recommend check out the Venom. I said I would show in game just before I finish up here, just so you could see what I meant with the front end of the Venom matching that hitbox exactly. Let's see if I can find a Venom in here. We must have a Venom somewhere. There's so many presets for that giveaway. There we go. So like that. Not as flat as the X-Devil MK2, but still pretty flat. And yeah, I really like the Venom. I thought it was great. I thought that it was the car that made the most sense in terms of ball carrying, because obviously the shape interacts with the ball exactly as you would expect it to do so, and shooting was very, very simple because this was a bang-on match. And the hybrid hitbox, of course, is something I wanted to give a go because of these cars. They turn faster than the Octane, they're longer than the Octane, they're about the same area altogether, so maybe 50/50s are going to be a bit of a learning curve, because you need to obviously use that length if you want to win the 50/50s by flipping earlier, get the roof to, like the roof of the car to come into play rather than just the very front end, where the Octane's going to win because it's both wider and taller. But yeah, hopefully that's been useful to some of you guys. This Reddit thread link will be in the description, so if you want to go and read everything. I didn't obviously go through all of this detail because there's only some things I wanted to talk about, but hopefully that's been educational to some of you guys, and I would recommend trying out the hybrid hitbox, see what you think. See how it compares to the Octane, because the more people start to play cars that are not literally the Octane, then I think the better, or the more it's going to be a snowball basically, and then even more people are going to try them and think, oh hey, this actually does work. The Octane's not the only good car. This is step one. So that's it for now. I'd recommend that you guys check this out. My favorite was the Venom. Let me know what your guys' favorite is out of the hybrids. And if you like this, I'll probably do this again with the Octane's hitbox, because, you know, that's actually something that interests me as well. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day. Take care.